Hey, good morning. It's Jack from Jack Gately Real Estate and the Online Real Estate Academy. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to be talking about CPI. CPI comes out in just a few minutes. We're going to cover that live. We'll do the live stream with CNBC. We'll join in progress in just a few minutes with Rick Santelli. We'll bring you that live here on this live stream. We're also going to talk about NAR and some expenditures from the most recent fiscal year for which reports are available. Very interesting story. We have some very interesting also marketing from two Florida real estate agents kind of mocking the industry a little bit and mocking how there's a big push now for social media influencers to be real estate agents, and they're not really even selling anything. They're just recruiting agents. And yeah, right, the old downline argument. I just recruit. I don't actually sell anything. We'll review quickly President Biden's first-time homebuyer program proposal. Politics. It's 2024, right? Presidential year. Affordable housing is a big, big, big issue. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the new Umansky Haber challenger, competitor, alternative, whatever you want to call it, to the National Association of Realtors, National Association of Realtors. So let's first take a look at and thank you for joining us this morning. Great to have you. Our expectations for CPI that is going to be released in just like 4 minutes. So CPI this morning, we're expecting, I like to look at the year-over-year number myself. We're looking at 3.1 is the expectation, the median forecast. 3.1 for the year over year on the CPI. The core CPI, which is ex food and energy, if I have that right, coming in at 3.7. 3.7. Now, you might remember we had the jobs number come in last week, and just as the jobs number coming in, I was like, looking at this seems kind of what's the word? Good news and bad, a mixed report. You know, we were expecting 198, and we got 275, but then the unemployment number was higher than expected. So we'll have to see. You know, when you look at the given month, any given month, the non-farm payroll number and the CPI number are usually the biggest market movers, and that's why we're live on this show this morning at 8:30 for the CPI. So looking at the FedWatch tool, and again, as you've heard me say, the goalposts keep getting moved, and they only do this as a snapshot. So we're going to see how this moves after the number is released. But right now, nobody is expecting a cut in March. Nobody's looking for a cut in March. There's like 3% expectation of a cut in March. And now the expectation of a cut in May is also very, very low at about 15%. 85% of the market is expecting no cut in May. No cut in May. Now, I just heard a very interesting interview on CNBC, which we'll cut to in a minute, as I mentioned, from Lazard, an analyst from Lazard. I guess they don't call it Lazard Ferris anymore. I must be dating myself, but Lazard. And he was like, you know, even if we do have rate cuts, he said that there might be some lowering of the short-term bond yields, like the 2-year, but not necessarily the 10-year. And in fact, he suggested that maybe they've already seen all the movement that you're going to get in the 10-year already. And that was because and he said this in the interview, and that was because of the massive federal government spending that is going on and the massive amount of borrowing that we have to do every week or so just to keep the lights on. And he said, you know, even if we have rate cuts, that doesn't necessarily mean mortgage rate cuts because of the premium that the market is demanding for long-term debt from the United States. Now, that is one other factor involved in that, of course, is that the spread between the 10-year and the 30-year mortgage, which has been running about 280-ish, we could see that reduce. And if we see that reduce, then we'll see mortgage rates go down, even if the 10-year doesn't move. So there's a number of moving parts for sure. Right now, talking about the 10-year, we have the 10-year, and we'll see we'll check back with this after the numbers released, but the 10-year is just under 4.1. And of course, mortgage rates are now at about their 4-week low at 6.87. That's for a 30-year fixed with good credit. They've been hovering around 6.9-ish for several days. And of course, they were above 7 for a little bit. We'll see what this very interesting CNBC or CPI report is going to be coming up, which is, we're just going to wait on it in just a second. We'll also talk about after that, when we come out of the number and a little bit out of the analyst discussion, we're going to talk about that Biden tax proposal. I think I mentioned this to you the other day that I went to a political event, and the first thing that the candidate talked about was affordable housing. I think I mentioned that to you last week's. First thing out of her mouth was like, I'm running for office. Thank you very much for coming. Affordable housing was the first thing. It was a huge issue. And being an election year, and that's why you get headlines like you see here from President Biden. President Biden proposes $10,000 tax breaks for first-time homebuyers for starter home sellers. President Biden has proposed a mortgage relief credit of $5,000 per year for 2 years for middle-class first-time home buyers. That's an interesting proposal. All right, so here we are. Here is Becky Quick. Let's cut to
that. Will show us the latest read on inflation. It's something the markets and the Fed are watching closely. Ahead of that, you're looking at the futures indicated slightly higher. Dow futures up by about 6 points. S&P futures up by 14. The Nasdaq's up by about 90 points right now. And Treasury yields have been lower for the most part. You're looking at the 2-year this morning, actually picking up a bit. It's now at 4.54%. The 10-year is yielding 4.08%, so just below 4.1%. We've been watching for this number, and Rick Santelli is standing by at the CME in Chicago. Rick, take it away.
All right, our February read on the Consumer Price Index headline number expected to be up 0.4% is up 0.4%. Now, if we look at the most recent lower number in this series, we had 0.3 in January, and we had 2.2s in November and December. So this is now a firming issue as we've had back-to-back reads we had up 0.4, now ex-food and energy also up 0.4, 1/10 hotter. So we have back-to-back on headline and core up 0.4%. Now, 0.4 equals the look we had last month on core, and the most recent lower number was October. That was up 0.2. That happened to have been the lowest since Feb of 21. So we're firming here. Now, the year-over-year numbers also hotter than expected. 3.2 on headline year-over-year. That's 3.2. That would be the highest since Deese when it was 3.4. January remains at 3.1. If we look at year-over-year core, 3.8. Now, this is interesting. This is 1/10 hotter than we were expecting, but it's cooler than the rear view mirror because we had back-to-back 3.9s, which were the lowest since May of 21, which was 3.8, which equals our current read day. Find a lower read on core year over year. You're going back to April of 21 when it was 3.0. It should come as no surprise that interest rates shot up in 10-year up to 4.13. They're hovering around 4.11. Pre-opening equities at Dow futures was really volatile right before the number came out. I saw up 2, up 4, -8, -9. Right now, though, you see it's -60 and counting. Now, that doesn't mean these numbers are going to stick. But when it comes to the interest rate side, I would say that as you look at the 2-year note, which was around 4.54, has moved up to 4.55. It certainly seems though the long end, which moved up from 4.08 to 4.11, 4.12, you want to pay close attention to the long end, especially after we're talking about budgets and deficits. The short end is going to be more about what's going on with the Fed. And before this number, we had the following setup. We had about 60 to 62% of a June cut, June 12th cut, and about 100% fully baked in for July 31st cut. And I'm sure those numbers are on the move. Becky, back to you.
All right, Rick, stay right there. We've got a lot more to talk about. And joining us right now with reaction to this new inflation data, we have Peter Earle, American Institute for Economic Research, senior economist, Skanda Amarnath, who is Employ America executive.
All right, so that was really interesting. Basically, what we had is a beat on both of the numbers. Both of the numbers came in slightly hotter than expected, with year-over-year CPI at 3.2 and year-over-year core CPI at 3.8. And I think the message from Rick Santelli this morning was, how do I want to say, affirming of the number. In other words, we're not really making any additional progress to lowering inflation. We've hit kind of a plateau. All right, let's go to Leisman.
3.8 was 3.7 was last month, so it did tick up a little bit. But here's the thing: I got a goose egg on food. I have owner's equivalent rent did come down. That's an important number, down to 0.4 from 0.6. Airlines shot up 3.6. Used cars down 1.8. New cars up 0.4%. That's what I was able to see here right now in terms of what the details were. So yeah, the Fed's going to look at this and say, you know what, our idea of being patient here. I think there's also a question, and I was sort of on board with this idea as to the extent to which January was an anomaly. Not sure it was anymore. Maybe there is a certain plateauing now of the CPI numbers, and the Fed either has to stay where it is right now, at least for a little while longer, in order to break the back of it and get it down more towards the 2% area.
Just a little while longer. Just 2 more weeks to bend the curve.
What do you take away after getting numbers that are a little hotter and inflation not slowing the way people had hoped or expected?
Yeah, I expected the February CPI, especially core, to be hotter month over month. You know, we still have some seasonal effects. Gasoline is up. It's interesting to see that food prices hadn't changed, because I figured they would be up a little bit too. You know, I think what we need to see is what happens in super core. And specifically, Steve, thanks for mentioning that owner's equivalent rent was down a little bit. You know, Powell's talk has shifted to a little bit of dovishness lately, but they still have in their back pocket the idea that they're going to be patient. So I think that if employment softens and if we see unemployment tick up to 4.0, 4.1%, and it's the usual suspects coming up disinflation, I think we're up for a rate cut in, say, June, maybe July.
Okay, maybe July, maybe pushing that.
Maybe July. Yeah. All right. It's transitory.
What this means for Americans who are kind of weighing through how they feel about the inflationary situation right now.
Thanks for having me on again. I think that the data today, obviously for January and February, even last year, we saw upside. But if you take a step back and look at the year-over-year readings, they are continuing to trend down. Maybe for some consensus, not as fast as expected, but still trending down. January and February in the last 3 years have been on the spikier side. And if you look through the details of this print, you see a lot of volatile prices driving up. So I'm talking about used cars, airline fares. These are things that tend to be pretty volatile month to month. I think the Fed has reason to take some heart from the fact that we're finally seeing some progress on owner's equivalent rent. What Peter said itself seems very reasonable to me, as far as the summer being a time when the Fed might consider interest rate reductions. But it's going to ultimately depend on further progress in inflation. But we've kind of gone through the January, February cycle. This is a time when new year, new prices really shows up in the CPI data. And it seems to be more pronounced post-pandemic. But by and large...
You think it's fair to think that the Fed is looking at patience as a key word, and maybe that's the right way to take it when you see bounces like this in the numbers?
I think they have grounds for patience in the short run, but if we do see further progress in March and April, that probably puts them in a better...
I don't see this as further progress. I think what Leisman said, or Reisman, or whatever his name is, I think what he said seems to make a lot more sense. This is more like a plateau. This is not really further progress. And, you know, I was doing my market update the other day, and I had noticed this before, but it seems like we are right now at this type of like inflection point where we have this question about where interest rates are going, and we're right on the edge of, at least here in New England, of what we call the spring selling season. So this is definitely variable across the country depending upon when your spring selling season is. But I think it's so important about where mortgage rates go for price in this very important upcoming spring selling season. So this is what I used as a thumbnail for the market update that I posted yesterday in Massachusetts. But as you can see here, usually in the spring, we have a spike in inventory. You see that in 2021, you see that in 2022, and pretty much every year going back before that, you get more houses on the market in the spring. April 1st, May 1st, it's a beautiful time of year. The tulips are out. Everyone's happy. Everyone's out walking, and everything's green. People coming out to see houses to buy. And if you look at last spring, we did kind of have a little bit of bump in the spring market, but not much, at least here in Massachusetts. And really didn't really get a bounce in the inventory until late in the summer, September, really. And if that's even in the summer, but we didn't get a big spring bounce like we usually did. And that kept prices high because there just wasn't much to pick from. So I'm really interested to see if that's going to happen again this year, whether our spring inventory bounce is actually going to bounce, because right now our inventory levels are slightly higher than they were in, say, 2021, 2022, but they're not really that high at all. Historically, they're still very low, 3,000 houses or so statewide in Massachusetts. And really, it's not unusual for us to have pre-COVID 6,000 houses. So every market's different. Certainly, we'd have different market components going on. And impacts, like in Southwest Florida, where I was in February, they have a massive amount of inventory. But what's really interesting is that the price really hasn't slouched all that much in Southwest Florida. It's definitely off the peak, but it's not proportionate with the volume of properties that have gone in the market, at least yet. So I love your comments. If you want to type in something, that would be awesome. We will take a quick look at where the Fed tool looks at us. It actually moved down slightly. For some reason, the market looked at that inflation report and said there's a slightly more well, we were at 85 before, now we're at 83% chance of a rate cut. And the 10-year is basically it popped a little bit, but it's basically back to where it was before the number came out. So that's very, very interesting. Moving on, I want to talk about this report, since we're talking about the Federal Reserve. Real estate news, Dave Gallagher, $30 billion savings from a la carte commissions. New research from the Federal Reserve puts a price tag on changing agent compensation, pushing it to be independent of the price paid for the home. So what the Fed did is basically did the study and say, okay, if agents were paid per task rather than on a percentage of the sales price, how much more money might that put in the pocket of consumers? And that's like a very popular election year type of question, right? Because somebody's going to then wrap this. There's just a moment away from somebody filing some type of piece of legislation that says real estate agents can't work on a percentage basis. There's only a minute away from that, right? That even if it won't fly, it's good press. This is an election year. We should bar agents from working on a percentage basis. Right? That's coming, right? I can see that a mile away. So they said that this would save consumers $30 billion and also eliminate the whole steering issue, as they say, so there's no issue about directing clients to one listing over another based upon how much you might make, because you're just going to work on a flat fee, like on a per showing basis. Or if you write up a offer, there's a flat fee for the fee to write up the offer. There's one agent's perspective says that this is going to hurt buyers, which we've heard this before, right? I'm more like the free market type of person, and just let the market decide what would be the perfect solution for pricing, right? I think we're, as far as I'm concerned, sure, use the government to crack the monopoly, but after that, let the free market decide and let consumers decide what they want to pay and for what service, if at all, right? And so that's why I'm on board with sellers pay their own agent, buyers pay their own agent, and let the party start in terms of innovative business models. And I'm really, again, very excited about the opportunities for different ways to make money in a potentially freed up marketplace. So Broke Agent is out with this report. They pulled because National Association of Realtors is technically a nonprofit. So they pulled the filings, the public record filings. They pulled all these filings. And here is some of the compensation for fiscal year 2022. Oh, man, Bob Goldberg, who's no longer with the association, $2.6 million. $2.6 million he got paid in fiscal year 2022. Mark Burschbach. He was the strategic vice president of strategic business innovation and technology, $1 million. Government affairs, $1 million. General counsel, just under $1 million. The Economist, who's probably the biggest voice of NAR. I think he's the most one that you see most outwardly. Lawrence. I don't want to get his name wrong. Yun, the Economist. $761,000. And there's more and more. I mean, these salaries are really, really high. President-elect. He's not even the president. He was the president-elect. Kenny Parcell, who has since resigned amidst alleged scandal. $265,000. Damn. That's a lot of money. Then you go to your independent contractors. Havas Marketing Group. Now, I'm not a realtor, as you know, but Havas Marketing Group had a contract in fiscal year 2022 with NAR worth $45 million. $45 million. Yeah. How did that? I wonder if they're still with NAR. I'm wondering. Projection Presentation Technology, Video Production and Services, $5 million. Or just you know what? I don't know if they've hired a new video production company, but God, their videos are horrific. As we've mentioned, like the last one that just came out was from Nakia Wright. It was like a hostage tape, word salad of nothingness. It literally looked like it was written by a corporate PR firm with absolutely no humanity to it. And that's why I've said, I've kind of like what Kevin Sears has when he is actually spoken in public. He seems tremendously relatable. They should have that guy out there on the front lines all the time rather than Nakia Wright or pretty much anybody else. I mean, he's likable and he's a good spokesperson for his point of view. They also went and did the following year in 2021. And talking about NAR, there is a new podcast with Umansky and Haber over at Bigger Pockets. NAR finally faces competition. Is the agent monopoly over? And this is what I've been saying for a long time, is that there's effectively two monopolies going on here. It's the monopoly of the Realtor Association against consumers, buyers and sellers. And then there's also the monopoly against of NAR against agents themselves. And especially the fact that in most markets, you have to have a NAR membership in order to get an MLS membership. Thank God not here in Massachusetts, but in most markets that is true. And they're basically running two monopolies. So they have a deeper pocket or Bigger Pockets podcast over here. I have to admit, I have not listened to this whole thing, just snippets. It's about 40 minutes. And this might be something that might be of interest to you. I'm finding this competitor to NAR to be an interesting thing, but they have a lot of work ahead of them. Jason Haber, who's part of the Haber Umansky alternative, which is called the American Real Estate Association, he is out with basically a tweet that basically says the vision: less agents, higher standards, more professionalism is how we see the future. So this whole less agents aspect, there's a lot of people out there that want less agents. There's a lot of people out there that want less agents. And the spin is, and I think this is a lie, the spin is if there's fewer how do I want to say this? The spin is that people who sell 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 houses a year, they're all professional. They're all ethical agents. And it's only the agent that sells 1 or 2 houses. Oh no, they're awful agents. And I just don't buy that generalization. I think you can find great agents that sell 1 or 2 houses a year. And I think you can find great agents that sell 10 houses, 20 houses a year. But you can also find the inverse. Just because of the number of houses you sell doesn't necessarily mean you're a great agent. It might mean you have a bigger paycheck, might not necessarily mean you're a great agent. All right, moving on. Keller Williams, folks. Mark King departs Keller Williams as president role amid layoffs. So I see this as just another situation where another executive, where do we have Bailey over at Remax? That was Remax, right? Bailey took 2 in the hat, about 2 weeks ago. And so here's another executive who is bowing out to spend more time with his family because transactions are down, right? We're in basically a transaction recession. CEO Mark Willis adds president to his title and confirms about 30 people have been let go from the company. Keller Williams president Mark King has stepped down from his executive role effective immediately, saying in a statement March 11th, "My heart is full of gratitude for every opportunity I've had there." Oh, isn't that nice? "We wish well, everybody. Massively grateful, blah, 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 blah." He had been president since February of 2021, will continue to work at Keller Williams as a franchise system orientation leader. What the hell does that mean? And on team leader with Keller Williams experiences. So basically, he's going to stay there probably because he has to, because he probably has some massive like downline that he wants to protect, but he's no longer going to be president of Keller Williams. By the way, I also noticed one of our market leaders here, Market Centers, Keller Williams Market Centers, they also took their market leader, so to speak, and now she's going back to production. I think this is definitely happening across the country at top level and also at market center levels, where people are basically being held accountable for whether it's their fault or not, for the fact that we're in a recession in terms of the number of transactions. Talking about, did I mention EXP? Well, we're talking about EXP now. Broke Agent reports that massive agent leaves EXP and joins Real Broker. So you might remember last week, we talked about Real Broker and how they had gained a lot of agents, but still lost $27 million. The announcements keep coming in. On February 19th, Real officially announced a record-breaking month and added 1,000 agents, surpassing its 15,000 mark. Less than a month later, on the 2023 earnings call, in which they lost $27 million, they reached 16,000 agents, but still lost money. How do you have, all right, they've only had 16,000 agents for a short time, but how do you have thousands and thousands of agents, even like 5, and still lose money? I don't get that. So this guy here, who I have not been familiar with, massive agent, maybe some of you have heard of him. He is now a real agent. And I did see, thanks to the Broke Agent, this really interesting video. We're going to
do you ever feel like we made the wrong choice? The years.
This is a video by 2 real estate agents in Florida, one on the Gulf Coast and one on the Space Coast. And it's mocking the industry. It's mocking the industry, especially this whole, apparently there's this whole social media thing where agents don't actually go sell anything. All they do is recruit other agents. But it's not a pyramid scheme. Nope, not a pyramid scheme. So here's their video mocking the whole situation.
Do you ever feel like we made the wrong choice?
The year's 2031. Every single realtor has been recruited by a cloud-based brokerage. Everyone except us.
Hey, how many agents do you think are still selling?
Not very many.
So this is a dystopian world where there's hardly any agents that actually sell anything. Everyone's just recruiting. That's how you get these companies that have massive agent counts but still lose money.
Until now, we've evaded their clutches, conducting business in the shadows.
What is it?
Another one came.
But they're closing in.
They found every other agent there is. It's only a matter of time before they find us too.
We stick to the routine. No conferences, no masterminds, and no podcasts.
No conferences, no masterminds, no podcasts.
We are the final resistance.
Oh my God. They found us.
Go, go, go! Knock, knock. I just want to talk about a revenue share. Don't look back. Why won't you join?
If I wanted to be recruited,
You would have joined the Navy.
Gentlemen, you can't outrun a downline.
All right, pretty funny. Way to go. I'm not sure if that is to attract buyers and sellers, or is that a way to attract agents to join their firm? I think it's the latter. You tell me. Anyways, by the makers of that video are Shane Bergman, who's over at the Space Coast and listing specialist, apparently, according to him, and some guy named Derek, who's a Southwest Florida realtor, which, of course, is where I spent a week down there in Southwest Florida, as I mentioned last month. And if you look at their Instagram's page, they got some unbelievable thumbnails and a lot of production value. I don't know how much money they're spending to create this type of content, but this is way several layers and levels up from what I'm producing. I'll tell you that. This is some heavy duty production value. Good for them. Does it bring them listings? I don't know. You tell me. All right, let's see if we have any comments today. Not at the moment. We'll check back with CNBC, who they're on a commercial break. So that is it for today. Have a great Tuesday. Go make some money. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.